When I called the fire service, I was already across the street. I wasn't panicking. I had my bag with me, my phone, and the small leather case with the jewelry inside. I wasn't going back in. I want to tell you about the 6 years before that night. Because the fire wasn't the beginning of the story. It was the answer to it. This is that story. I came to work for Henry in the autumn of the year he turned 78. His wife had been gone for 11 years. His children, 3 sons and a daughter, had their own homes, their own lives, their own money. Henry had been generous with them over the years. He was a man who believed that giving while you could see the good of it was better than leaving it all to be argued over later. He never told me any of that. I worked it out from the house. He was sharp when I arrived. Slower than he used to be, he told me once, though I had no way of measuring that against the man he described. He liked to read in the mornings and hated being interrupted before 11. He had opinions about tea, specific ones, which he explained in my first week and then never mentioned again, because I had listened the first time and he had noticed. He was the kind of man who noticed when people listened. His sons came once a month, sometimes less. His daughter came more often, but never for long, an hour, occasionally 2. When they were in the house, they weren't unkind to me. They were something closer to unaware of me. I moved past them and they adjusted for me the way you adjust for furniture, automatically, without any thought behind it. They called me by my first name. Henry called me by my name the way people do when the name itself is the thing, not just the label. I don't think they were bad people in the ordinary sense. I think they had simply never had a reason to look carefully at someone in my position. When you have enough money, the people who care for you can become part of the house the same way the furniture does. You stop seeing them as separate from it. Henry didn't see me that way. That was the difference between him and his children, and that difference was the reason for everything that came after. In the 5th year, Henry's health began to change in ways that good days and small adjustments could no longer cover. He needed more from me now, and I gave it. I don't say that to be thanked. Caring for him was my job. I say it because everything that came later rested on the plain fact of it. I was there for the hard mornings, the ones where he needed watching almost every hour, and for the quieter ones that came in between. I was there at night when the pain settled in and he would sigh and shift and never quite sleep. Every appointment, every change of medication, every time the house felt too large and too quiet, and he just needed to know someone was in the next room. I was in the next room. His children came more often that year. They came the way people do when they sense something is ending and don't want to have missed it. I understood that. It wasn't nothing. But I noticed the difference between coming and staying. Between arriving and being there. Henry noticed it too. There was a week in the 5th year when he had a serious relapse. 4 nights that kept me awake through most of them. His daughter drove up on the 3rd day, stayed a couple of hours, and had to get back. His sons texted. I didn't leave. When he was well enough to sit up, he asked me to come into the study. There was a small box on the desk. Worn leather, the kind that comes from a jeweler's and stays in a family for a long time. He opened it. Inside was a brooch, small and detailed, a spray of garnets set in gold, the sort of thing made in a period when small things were given great care. He told me it had been his mother's, that she'd worn it every day for 40 years, and that he'd kept it all this time because he'd never been able to give it to anyone who hadn't first asked about it. He said, "Do you want to know what it is?" I said yes. He told me. Then he put it back in the drawer and said nothing else about it. But I understood what it was. Not a gift, not yet. A signal. He had watched who came when he asked for nothing, and now he was letting me know he had seen. That, he said, is how I know. He didn't say what he knew. He didn't need to. Henry passed in March. I was with him. The house stayed quiet for 3 days. Then his eldest son arrived. The others followed over the next day or two, and after them came the attorney. Henry had left his children money, enough that none of them would be diminished by anything else in the will. He had left the house to me. He had left me a further sum. And the jewelry, the full contents of the box in the study drawer, came with a note in his handwriting that had been filed with the attorney. These pieces have never been asked about by anyone I did not want to have them. His children were quiet for a moment. Then they were not. David, the eldest, said it first. It wasn't legal, he told me. She was an employee. Our father wasn't well. I said his father had been fully competent when the will was drawn, that his own attorney could confirm that, and that mine could too. He looked at me for a long moment. It was, I think, the first time he had looked at me directly in 6 years. I held his gaze. He looked away first. I called my own attorney that evening. I had found her 2 weeks before Henry passed, when I'd started to understand that I might need one. I hadn't known what was in the will, but I knew his children, and I'd been paying attention. She told me to document everything, to stay in the house rather than leave it voluntarily, and to be careful. I said I would. The weeks after the reading were not comfortable. David had stayed in the house. He said he wasn't ready to leave his father's home. I understood what he was doing. The atmosphere changed the way atmospheres do when someone wants you to feel unwelcome in a place you have every right to be. Small things. A room going quiet when I walked into it. Conversations that stopped. The morning I found the lock on the study had been changed. I photographed the lock and sent the picture to my attorney. My attorney filed preliminary documents that week. She said the will was sound and that the challenge David was pursuing had no real basis. Then, stay in the house. Stay calm. Stay in contact. I stayed. I stayed calm. But I had also begun, quietly, to prepare. I kept a bag ready, not because I meant to leave, because I had worked for that family for 6 years, and I knew them. I woke at 2 in the morning. I didn't hear anything. I smelled it. Smoke. Faint but specific. I had cared for Henry through 6 winters in that house, and I knew every smell it made. This wasn't one of them. I knew, standing there, exactly what I was looking at. It wasn't an accident. That back sitting room did not catch fire by itself at 2 in the morning, 6 weeks into a legal dispute over Henry's estate. Someone had done the arithmetic. I was inside. I was asleep. Whatever came next would be called a tragedy. I was outside. I was awake. The arithmetic was wrong. The fire was contained. The house was damaged, but not destroyed. David wasn't in the house that night. None of them were. My attorney noted that before I had to. The fire investigation found evidence of accelerant. David's challenge to the will was withdrawn within a week of that finding. What followed took 7 months. At the end of it, the house was mine. It needed repairs. I oversaw them, and I moved back in on a Tuesday in October, almost exactly a year after the estate reading. I've thought many times about what Henry said, that he had watched who came when he asked for nothing, and that this was how he knew. He had been watching for years. He had seen what I gave and what his children didn't, and he had made his arrangements accordingly. He was not a man who made arrangements carelessly. The jewelry is still in the same drawer, all of it except the brooch. The brooch, his mother's, garnets set in gold, made in a period when small things were given great care, I wear. Not always. But when I want to remember that someone in that house saw me clearly, I put it on. He told me its story late, years in, once he had decided about me. His children never asked. That was always going to matter. They just didn't know it yet. They called the jewelry old and not worth the trouble. They were right that it was old. They were wrong about the rest. If this is the kind of story you came here for, the ones people don't usually say out loud, subscribe. There's a new one every week.